Hello everyone. This video is going to be some personal thoughts about astrology, the future of astrology, what I see happening, and I am going to give a promotion at the end. But the promotional part, I'll also make a separate video for just the promotion. There are some genuine reflections that I want to offer here as well. I recognize something that maybe wasn't so evident to me a few years ago. It's very clear now. Astrology is really, really on the rise. I've never seen this. I've been studying astrology and in particular evolutionary astrology since 2005. It's been like the main thing I've ever done job-wise even as an adult, which is quite unusual, right? It's quite unusual for someone to get into it that early and for that to be their, main work and their source of sustenance for so long. So I feel very fortunate that this kind of came to me early on. When I first began studying astrology, in general, it was a pretty fringe thing. Most people weren't into it. If there was an interest in astrology, it was pretty superficial. Right now, I feel like there are lots and lots of souls, in particular younger souls, that are genuinely drawn to study it. And there's a lot more integrity in it, right? There's a lot more like, what does it actually speak to? What can we do with it? What does it really mean, this planetary function? How can I actually apply that? I think we've grown through a couple of generations of spirituality and spiritual teachings that were new and exciting and meaningful, but maybe weren't totally grounded, right? Like that's almost like the first stage of any kind of spiritual renaissance, where there's the awareness of something, and then those who bring it forward, it's revelatory, it's initiatory, right? Like in my early days and before me were like the first good books being written. I mean, there are books written before I was born, but many of the core texts and insightful revelations. I mean, Chiron, Melanie Reinhardt was one of the first people. We have Barbara Hand Clow, right? Just that alone, that was 70s, 80s, 90s. Jeffrey Wolf Green in the 80s with the Pluto book. That was the first time anyone, as far as I'm aware, speaking to Pluto in the ways that he had. There are so many initial groundbreaking realizations about how astrology reflects the evolution of consciousness that's just been happening over the past few decades. Like the stage 2 refinement process is where that's taken, and maybe taken off of sort of the hype of like, oh, this is so exciting and a big, right? And normalized, like brought into, okay, how do we measure it? How do we apply it? How do we integrate it? How do we institutionalize it? How do we teach this to more people? How do we also honor and value the scientific facet of it? Again, because I think when something begins, it's incredibly exciting and meaningful. I mean, take psychedelics, for example, right? In the 60s and 70s, it was so exciting, but there wasn't a sense of responsibility around it. There wasn't a sense of what's the best container or context. How do we really work with this as medicine, right? Now we have a lot of psychedelic assisted therapy training, a lot more scientific research. Everything becomes, same thing with yoga, right? Comes into this world, and we have like the initial, like into the West rather, right? The initial like, oh, this is so exciting and great. But as anything becomes more prevalent in society, it's always going to be sort of taken in two directions. It's going to be misused and abused, and the egos will take it and manipulate it in all kinds of ways, right? And we'll also become aware of the need and the calling to clarify and create better parameters, more awareness around the whole culture of these things, right? How is it used? How are we using it? What's the healing way to do it? What not to do? We become aware of the next level of matured integration. That's why studying astrology is great, but also learning how to use it ethically is also really great. Knowing our motivations, understanding the ethics of looking at a person's chart, like these are all such important things. But most importantly, in my opinion, maybe equally importantly, is bringing ethics and self-responsibility into our practice of it in terms of, do I actually know what I'm doing? Am I using this in a way that reflects trained practice experience, right? Or am I just regurgitating something that I've learned? The more we practice something and see it in the world, the more we actually realize, oh, this is real, this is beneficial, this can have a huge impact. I better know what I'm talking about, right? Again, take psychedelics. we realize, oh, this is actually really powerful and potentially really healing stuff, but potentially really damaging if not done thoughtfully, right? So there's less popularity in the sort of like, just go for it heroic dose. We realize we know more about trauma. We know more about how to hold space for trauma and healing trauma and how psychedelics can support that. Same thing with the natal chart. As we've come to really understand, especially with soul level modalities like EA and others, we see, whoa, the natal chart is incredibly deep, incredibly intimate, right? It's like I went to a gathering once, and my daughter was playing with some other kids, and this one child had a name that was a particular planetary body, and of course I was like naturally interested. Oh, I wonder where this planet is in their chart, and I didn't think to ask, and then I asked, and I looked at their chart, and I felt really awkward after I looked at this child's chart. I realized, oh, why did I ask to look at their chart? What was the reason for that? Like, I just looked at a soul's chart, right? Like, the natal chart is so freaking intimate. It says so much about the deeper content and points to like deeper thresholds of unconscious realities that we're actually going to continually uncover. And to look at it and to gain insight in it and perspective and interpretation, certainly to even be speaking about it, it doesn't just require consent. It requires immense humility and integrity. Why am I doing this? Why am I looking at what's the purpose of this? I've even become reflective of this in terms of, when I teach classes and I want to bring forth a celebrity chart example, I really think about, why am I doing this? Why am I looking at this person's chart? And there are very interesting conversations to have around, when is it okay to look at a person's chart if they're famous? But in a sense, we're looking very deeply at something, and it's very intimate. So these are important conversations. I feel that they are very important conversations, and in the very least, having immense thoughtfulness and mindfulness around what am I doing and why am I doing it, and is this ethical? Is this aligned? Do I feel an integrity with myself? Again, same thing with anything. Take yoga. We can just teach something and we can realize, wow, if I don't really know what I'm doing, this can be hurtful to the body, right? If I just say stand on your head. In fact, I've received injuries from my earlier years doing yoga practices and not being adequately trained for certain postures. So anything that spends time in the world kind of goes from that adolescent phase. I think we can call it more of an adolescent phase of, well, this is exciting and amazing, to a more matured, how do we master it? How do we use it appropriately? And I'm just saying this is a very important conversation. I am so appreciative of all the podcasts that are out there right now. There's so many good podcasts on astrology alone, right? I mean, there's Astrology Hub, which is like beloved to my heart, and I love what they're doing and how they are just like honoring and celebrating all the different pathways of astrology and just serving the intention to make it more available. And then other teachers of particular paradigms, some evolutionary astrology, others of every kind of paradigm there are. And then those that maybe have taken from several, right? There are more scientifically oriented podcasts. There's just so many out there. There are even spiritual teachers that are just beginning to like integrate astrology in their syntax of knowledge and understanding and vocabulary. These tend to be more of the esoteric Gnostic kinds that orient to more medieval teachings. There's still a little bit of a chasm between the non-dual spiritual world and astrology. It's like they haven't quite like the non-dual teachers haven't quite opened up to like the value of astrology. It almost feels like less magical thinking, I think the phase that we're moving into right now is where astrology becomes more integrated in every single field and every single line of thought. And I'm particularly interested in that. I actually am like, sometimes I'll just like think about what would I say if I was talking to, some sort of secular scientist about astrology, right? Where I'm not trying to prove anything, but to actually hold the credibility and the realness of it with an open mind, presenting something that I have immense direct experience of in a way that is opening the doors to the possibility of this too being scientific. This too can be included in the realm of our intellectual organization of reality. I would love to see more astrological conversations on podcasts like Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman, who is an amazing neuroscientist, or Lex Fridman, who will interview anyone. I mean, there are just like so many in the world of knowledge and information. There's so much out there, but astrology is just on the cusp. It's just on the cusp, right? It hasn't yet become quite credible enough. It's still being very much popularized in more pseudoscientific kind of ways. A lot of the main voices culturally, I think, are not necessarily in integrity with it. The mainstream perspective on it is still not really honoring how real it actually is. So here's a very interesting thought. If astrology is even a little real, like if Mars and where Mars is has anything to do with our experience, then all of it has to have some sort of relevance, right? Like it's either completely irrelevant or not at all. And so some people might say, yeah, there's something to it, but it's like, okay, if there's something to it, what is that something? Like this might seem like a very not so deep thought, but if you just contemplate for a moment, if there's any level of meaning or relevance to anything astrology, it immediately opens up the door to then, what is it? This was one of my frustrations with astrology when I was beginning to study. I was turned off by the descriptive books that I was reading. And this, I think, is a general disservice to astrology, although it has its own benefits, of course. But in the longer scheme of things and really bringing out into the world, the more descriptive orientations didn't land inside. I'm like, that can't be true for everyone. Like Mercury and Libra, everyone has that tendency. That can't be true, right? Or sun sign astrology, that can't be true. It can't be that simple. I needed a way to validate what I intuited was true, which is like, no, there is something to astrology, but what I'm reading doesn't seem it. Like it seems to fall short. When people would ask me about it, I actually got to a point where I gave all of my books away or got rid of all, and I had a lot. I was really into it. But I just felt like it's real. I know it's true, but I don't feel that we can grasp what that truth is. And so I almost felt like it's not worth going there. This for me personally was a point of humility because it was a way of me accepting that I'm never going to know. I'm never going to understand it all. It's just true. It's at that time that Jeffrey Wolf Green's teachings and evolutionary astrology came into my life, and I was deeply touched and affected by the soul level authority with which I saw the teachings expressed. It resonated with a deeper knowing inside of me, and this began my path with astrology. But I share this in the work that I do now. I share this because the world, I feel, is seeking something that has more meaning, that's accessible and isn't woo-woo, isn't fluffy, can be tested with thoughts, with questions, with analysis, with data, with critical thinking. We've lived through too much of the descriptive, sort of branded, larger conceptual ideas that sound nice but aren't necessarily helpful in our day-to-day lived experience. So this is where there's a deep calling right now for those studying and practicing astrology is to step up, to say, well, if I want to practice this or if I want to study this, I have to really commit myself to know, what does this actually mean? What does this actually reflect? And the meaning will always deepen with our realization, but am I using it and expressing it in a way that's accurate and true and helpful? Or am I just sort of being lazy about it? We can't do that anymore. This next generation of astrological study is calling for a greater level of integrity and clarity to bring astrology on par with many other spiritual sciences that we have out there. I mean, we have neuroscientists and other podcasters speaking about meditation, the benefits of meditation, which is great, right? Let's get astrology there too. It's not my goal in life, honestly. It's not my goal in life. I'm not like, that's not my, but it interests, it's exciting to me. It really is. And I feel just because I'm carrying this work and just my own nature, I'm inherently excited and interested in learning. I'm always drawn to expand my framework of understanding of reality and to see the interconnectedness between all things. So this is something that naturally has interest in me, to have a conversation with a neuroscientist who understands the brain about astrology, or to have a conversation with a psychologist or a psychotherapist who understands deep level psychology about astrology. I mean, there's so much more nuance to unravel here. Astrology has been benefited immensely from the work of Carl Jung. I mean, Jeff Green really integrated a lot of his learning from Carl Jung, actually. He speaks about Uranus as corresponding to the individuated unconscious. The very framing of that term comes from Carl Jung. I mean, astrology borrows from, but also can really give a lot to all of the different sciences and practices out there. So this is something that I think is meaningful. I'm sharing this to say, well, one thing, there are a lot of trainings and practices out there, and it's a calling for the teachers, myself included, and for the students to really hold quality and integrity as the highest value. As I teach, I'm constantly refining, clarifying, do I know what I'm talking about? Is this true? What is the basis for what I'm saying? And is it helpful? Where am I coming from? And what don't I know? What are my questions? Oh, where can I refine and clarify? This is an area where I don't really understand it, right? I think any teacher should always be checking themselves and always willing to find the edge of their own growth. And for the students to recognize we're entering into a field that has such wisdom and such benefit, and the world has yet to meet it on the level that it's going to. I loosely predict in the next 10, 15 years or so, astrology as a profession and as a training is going to take a whole new level. Maybe even university courses and accredited courses and just like longer, more thorough trainings, because there's so much. I mean, you can go so deeply in just medical astrology for mainstream doctors. Imagine that, right? Psychologically oriented spiritual authority for psychotherapists. I mean, the benefits of astrology for every field is immense, okay? The second reason why I'm sharing this, and this is sort of a leading into the promotion, but don't stop watching just yet because this is meaningful to share, and I think there's some useful reflections in it. I'll tell you when I get to the promotion, and I hope you'll stay for that because this is an exciting thing that I want to talk about. In recognition that many of the astrological paradigms are growing and people are seeking astrology more, myself and others from the EA community have really felt to do what we can to make the teachings of evolutionary astrology more accessible, more available, in a truly solid, accessible way for more souls. This is why we created the Jeffrey Wolf Green Association of Evolutionary Astrologers last year. Michelle, my family partner, has been working with us. She's been the main administrator, created a website. We offered a 9-class series, a live chart reading with some of the top evolutionary astrology teachers in the world. By top, I mean those who have been working in this work for a long time. Some of us study with Jeff Green, some of the most world-renowned astrologers. And we're continuing this work and continuing to look into ways that we can make this work more available. One of the main motives is to just bring this out into the world in more accessible ways. And it's not just serving astrology, it's serving evolutionary astrology, which is a paradigm that is really focused on the evolutionary journey of the soul, looking at the natal chart as a way to truly understand our own inner reality. It's a deeply psychological. I think the deepest level of psychology is that which points everything back to the self, to our own mind, to our own inner reality, and takes responsibility for everything. That's always going to be uncomfortable, empowering at times, but it's always on some way going to push the edge of where we don't want to grow. That's why I love this work. That's why it's meaningful for me. It's always going to challenge me where I'm not really wanting to be challenged. It pushes the edge in that way. So I'm grateful to do what I can to share this work. And of course, this has been my main personal work. It supports myself, it supports my family. I'm deeply blessed by this. So the next thing that we're doing, and this is what I'm wanting to share and promote, is the Jeffrey Wolf Green Evolutionary Astrology Conference. This is the first ever online conference taught by evolutionary astrology. Let me just say a little bit about what that means. There used to be live conferences. The last live conferences took place 2011 and 2012. I was invited to teach in both of those conferences. That was probably around the time that I was really stepping into more of my teaching. It's when I wrote my beginner's guide to evolutionary astrology. That was that was like, yeah, like really the beginning of my sort of stepping into carrying this work in my own way. It was an exciting time. During those conferences, I met many of the old-time teachers of EA. Many of those teachers are going to come back and teach at this conference, myself and 14 other teachers. Again, I would say the most skilled, practiced, world-renowned teachers out there will be teaching this conference. Myself, Kristen, Lauren Albandian, Patricia Walsh will have a guest, Demetra George, Dava Green. My apologies because I'm not going to remember everyone's name. So I'll just quickly look through here. Simon Vorster. We have some newer astrologers who are newer to teaching. Helen Garcia, Jordan Smith, Bradley Narrigan, who I taught with many years ago. Kim Marie, Stephen Wolfson, he's an old-time astrologer. Rav Chahal, Jason Holly, Rose Marcus, and Michelle Dench as well. So just an amazing lineup of teachers. In my more official promo, I'll go through the website and share all of that with you. This is an opportunity for those who are both new to this work or really want to just be exposed to it, like fully immersed, to attend with some amazing talks, amazing lectures, and those that are already more involved in this work, to immerse yourself in the community and the teachings. This could be a stepping stone to deeper study, open up the doors, and just an opportunity to clarify various fields of knowledge within the EA world. What we're excited about with this conference, because we're really wanting to bringing it out in the good way, is we're just really looking forward to creating truly quality presentations. We want to present the information, the teachings in a really accessible and helpful way. So I'll end the video here just by saying this is what we're doing right now in terms of supporting the teachings of EA to get out there in the world. It's supporting the teachings of EA. It's also supporting the teachers of this evolutionary astrology modality to be supported in this teaching. It's good for astrology in general to be respected and regarded in the same way that all other kinds of spiritual practices and sciences and arts are studied as well. This is the next phase in the astrological world. So I invite you all to check it out. I'll put the link in the description below. And thank you for watching and just being with me in the reflection of these ideas and thoughts. And also, I'm actually curious to hear, I don't often invite people to share in their comments intentionally, but this is fascinating to me. Two questions, sincerely. One, what do you see as like the movement, the future of astrology in the world? And what are some ways in which you see it being used and integrated? It'd be cool to hear what you have to say about that.